following message is brought to you by Mike Koplitz. He is an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church and an ordained Messianic rabbi. In Luke's gospel, this is his final time going into Jerusalem, and of course we know what's going to happen there. The writer is trying to tell us the step-by-step events that occurred during that last trip. Thus, he began his journey in Galilee and proceeded towards Samaria. To travel from Capernaum, which is in the Galilee, to Jerusalem, which is in Judea, you had to pass through Samaria. There were very few roads that existed in Jesus' day. The main road toward Jerusalem was to take the Via Maris road, which was near the Mediterranean Sea, down to a point where you took the crossover road to Jerusalem. Since Jesus would have had a large entourage with him, they could have traveled alone as a large group on the road. Normally, people would not travel by themselves. Bandits and thieves were always on the road searching for people who were by themselves so that they could rob them, and if one resisted, it could result in their death. So Jesus and his entourage entered the Samaritan territory. Jesus knew that they had to find food and water, and it would have been nice if they could have had a place to sleep rather than sleeping outside. They did not have tents with them. These were rugged people. They slept on the ground when necessary. The culture of the day said that when a dignitary or religious leader came toward a town, that one or two persons would be sent ahead to announce that this person was arriving. They would also help the town prepare for the arrival of the dignitary. Jesus sent messengers ahead of him, as was the custom of the day. The messengers returned to tell him that the town was not interested in his stopping in. This appears to go completely against the culture of the Near East regarding hospitality. Near Eastern people were very hospitable, even to strangers. However, there were some constraints. The first constraint was that one family could not host a large contingency that we know was with Jesus at that time. Food was scarce, and even though the lady of the house would have made bread for strangers who may come knocking at her door, she certainly would not have made enough bread for 12 to 20 people. There was also the understanding that in this case, a religious leader was going to come into the town who was already a controversial figure. The people of the town would have been concerned that if they hosted Jesus and his entourage, that the religious leadership even of Samaria might not have been pleased about it. Unfortunately, even in Jesus' day, smears were out there about who he was and what he was doing. That was very unfortunate because the Samaritan village that he was going to visit lost out on a fabulous opportunity. The author of Luke's gospel doesn't even tell us the name of the village was. James and John wanted to have Jesus destroy the village in the same manner that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. However, Jesus rebuked them. Why in the world did he rebuke them? Well, that's the lesson that we need to learn from this passage. I call it tolerance. Jesus is saying to us that we must be tolerant of people who do not want to believe in him as God's Messiah or even as God on earth. If Jesus were to destroy every person, even in his day, that did not believe in him, there wouldn't be very many people left at that time. Jesus also recognized that people in different areas of the world will view God differently. That is why we have so many religions in the world. Think about the church for just a moment and realize that there are over 1,000 recognized denominations in Christianity. And that doesn't even include all the independent churches that are out there. We have differences in interpreting the scripture and the doctrine and the rituals. Over the course of 2,000 years, different thinking has developed about Jesus' mission and how we are supposed to react to him and to the Bible. I know it's a difficult thing. We need to be tolerant, not only of people who will not accept Jesus as the Messiah, but also the differences of thought within Christianity. We need to learn to love one another and be tolerant of one another first as Christians. We must recognize that we see things differently, and obviously Jesus is okay with that because he let this occur. In fact, if the church denominations would come together and unite as one in their differences, we could convince the world that Jesus is the answer. There have been too many wars fought between Christian denominations. People can look at our history and see the bloodshed that occurred just during the Reformation. And actually, we could go to something more recent, where Catholics and Protestants were killing each other in Ireland not that many decades ago. Religious tolerance is what this passage is talking about. So we need to acknowledge that there are people out there who will never accept Jesus, and that's okay because they have to discover God by themselves. That's just the way it is. We also must become tolerant of the different denominations and different ways people think about the life of Christ. Differences between people in their thinking will always exist. Perhaps one day we will learn that if we all come together and work together with our differences, we could bring Jesus into this entire world and remove the evil, thus bringing peace and grace and love to everyone. That was Jesus' plan for the kingdom of heaven.
Thank you for listening to this message. I hope it blesses you in some way. And as always, shalom.